the WomanGathering for the Front Royal Women's Resource Center. Thank you all so much for coming. We really appreciate it. We're so excited. I'll let Becca introduce our guests today, but in the meantime, I would just like you all to know about the Front Royal Women's Resource Center. We are a 501c3. We're a nonprofit. We give grants to women in the community and young girls too. And we support women in the area through programs, education, and information. So that's our little snapshot. Go to our website or our Facebook page, www.frwc.org. You can see we're doing a Facebook Live, and welcome. Thank you. I'd like to now turn this over. We do have a few events, which I'll talk at the end.
Yeah.
But right now, I want to introduce Ethel Capiotis.
Thank you.
Our interviewee extraordinaire.
Oh, thank you. Hi. I'm real excited today to have our guest, Melanie Forde. And Melanie and I met
a million years ago.
And, you know, I just liked her so much, but she would never tell me what she did because she is a ghostwriter. So I could never find out anything about what she was actually doing. And ladies, you know, I know you're going to be jealous, but she's actually earned her living writing all her life. And so due to a series of things that she always wanted to write a novel. And so now she's written a novel, and yay, we get to read her work and know it's her. 2 novels, 3, right? Okay, well, 4. All right, well, welcome, Melanie Forde.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a delight to be here and sort of have the opportunity to have a little bit more exposure, which is always nice, and especially to meet folks who've actually read some of the novels already, and they seem to have liked them, which is nice. And I have to apologize because I have a terribly scratchy voice. It's not sore, but it's allergy season, and if I sound like I'm dying, I'm not. It just is scratchy.
You're not being dramatic.
I'm not being dramatic. No, I'm not about to burst into tears.
Well, so tell us, what was the inspiration for your book? And tell us just a little bit overview of your book, Hillwilla.
Well, the short version is that it's a novel that plays out in contemporary West Virginia in a very remote corner of it in the southeast, which is where I happen to live. Write what you know. And it features a northern urban transplant whose name is Beatrice Desmond. She's a 50-something widow with no children. And when the series begins, she's seriously questioning why she did this, why she moved to this remote hollow. She's desperately lonely. She's feeling she's frustrated with herself for failing to make any meaningful connections with the locals, who tend to view outsiders with suspicion. And she's overwhelmed by the tasks of inheriting a small herd of llamas from a late friend. Piled on top of that, she's devastated by the death of the recent death of that friend. Excuse me. The friend was an important lifeline for her. And to compound the misery at the beginning of the series, which is why it has this very somber-looking cover, we're going into winter, and Beatrice is not a good person with winter. So she starts spiraling down into an alcoholic depression. And not very far into this winter, the reader becomes very much aware that she's headed for big-time trouble unless she can pull herself out of this funk. Fate intervenes, dumping 2 people into her life, totally against her will, and she goes kicking and screaming against it, but it's the best thing that could have happened to her. And through these people, not that there isn't a lot of conflict and more challenges that she has to face, but through these people, she finds a new sense of family with people with whom she shares absolutely no DNA, and she has an opportunity to reinvent herself. And there are, it doesn't end in, oh, everything is rosy and everyone walks off into the sunset. There are a series of conflicts, and there are sad things that happen, and examples where the 3 main characters totally sabotage themselves. But there are also a lot of, I think, very funny moments, and I'd like to share some of those with you later. But
Yeah, I was going to say, the way you're talking about it, it sounds like a kind of a dark book, and there are some parts of it that are dark. But actually, it's very fast-paced.
Oh, thank you, because some people have complained, because it's character-driven, have complained that it's kind of slow.
Oh, no, I didn't think so
Thank
at
you.
all. No, no, Katrina. The people that have read it are all going, no, 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 it's not slow. The chapters are short.
Yes, very short.
They're really rich. And in a very, you know, one thing I always appreciated about you is your very quick wit. And it really shines through in the
You're
books.
putting me under pressure now, because I'm a terrible ad
No, 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 you don't need to do that now. But I mean, in the book, things move quickly, and the intelligence with which it is written, the wisdom that shines through the pages. I mean, I really enjoyed it.
I mean, everyone likes to hear nice things said about there. It's lovely when it comes from someone who has some extra insight, I think, into the human condition, and thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. And the other thing that I think maybe you're not as aware of as we are is, you know, being very focused on women's issues, is that it's really a book about women's issues.
Well, it's funny. We had an email conversation about this before, and I was a little bit concerned that maybe it wouldn't fit into, you know, because I'm not writing about things that expressly happen to women. I mean,
No.
Everybody experiences loss, male or female. Everybody, male or female, goes through that creepy phase in late middle age where, you know, your body is starting to fail you. You're losing friends to illness and things like that. But I think that you mentioned that she negotiates it in a way that only a woman would negotiate hardship.
Absolutely.
And I think something else that touches on how she negotiates it is in part through female friendships.
Yes.
And the importance of female friendships is a theme that runs through the 2 published novels and the 3rd and final aspect, which hopefully will come out in the not too distant future. I think it's uniquely female. I know lots of guys have important male friendships, but I think there's something very unique about female friendships, where I know lots of guys who basically have no male friends once they get married. They leave their social life to the wives. And God bless the ones that have their gang of male friends. But I think even by comparison with those, it's different for women. Our friendships tend to be more emotionally intimate, and that's why Beatrice is so devastated at the beginning of the series, because she's lost her closest confidant and an important lifeline, and she just feels at sea. But even she's lost that one, there are a few other friends that show up who...
Unexpectedly.
Well, not even the unexpected ones. I was thinking of Evie, her old friend
Okay.
that goes back to when they were in their 20s together. And the 2 women couldn't be more different ostensibly in terms of cultural background, political views, and yet they're best buddies. And I don't think that's unusual with women.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think for women, female friendships tend to be the things that sustain us in hard times, sometimes even more than our family, because there are times you need to bitch about your family, and who do you bitch about your family? And I think women...
Everybody's nodding and smiling.
And I think, how many guys bitch to male friends about their sex life?
I don't think they do.
And I think these friendships are important to a woman's physical as well as emotional health.
Yes.
And that's part of why Beatrice is circling down the tubes, because she's so isolated when the series begins.
And yet she has to bring out her nurturing part, because she is suddenly taking care of this herd of llamas.
And ultimately this 13-year-old local girl, when she has absolutely zero mothering experience and has no faith that she's going to be able to pull it off, and makes all sorts of mistakes in the meantime. But I like that. I have no interest in ever writing about characters who aren't flawed. I like flawed. Gives them more depth, gives them more of a richness.
Yeah. Well, it certainly is a really rich and deep book, and I love the intelligence with which it was written, I had started to say something about that, but the language, no, I mean, we're going to keep circling back, as women do. We start down a path, we circle back that way, we go that way. There's not a straight line, right?
Right.
So I love that you use such intelligent words. You know, I had to look a few up.
50 words.
I did, but it was great because it also adds a certain depth. I thought it was written very. I can't think of a better a word. I probably should have thought about this, but intelligently. You know,
I'll take it.
It's an intelligent book. It's not dumbed down in the least.
It is not chick lit.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So, are you by chance going to read a little?
Well, I thought maybe I would start, ironically, with a reading from the second book, On the Hillwilla Road, because the prologue to it provides a nice overview of the physical setting of Beatrice's farm, and also I think gives some feel for West Virginia itself, or rural West Virginia itself. And I consider West Virginia one of the characters in the book.
Yeah. Well, and let me just say while you're doing that I noticed, you know, you have the llamas in there, but also I noticed when people were reviewing it on Amazon that they mentioned, well, this is a book about animals.
Yeah, but that's okay. I will always have
because there's a
animals.
lot of animals in the book
Yes,
too.
there is,
Yeah.
especially Ralph the dog.
Ralph the
He's a
dog,
main
right.
character.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The golden eagle coasting on the updrafts rising from Beatrice Desmond's 40 mostly wooded acres surveys a landscape little influenced by man. No, the black walnuts and maples and sycamores far below did not coexist with the indigenous people who occasionally hunted and trapped but established no permanent settlements in this deeply crenellated section of the Allegheny Mountains. Nonetheless, the trees are old. Although logging is an ongoing industry in other parts of Seneca County, which is a fictional county named by the same, these particular hardwoods in southeastern West Virginia have stood undisturbed for many decades. In spring, shade-loving morels and pungent wild leeks flourish beneath the trees. In summer, bear cubs exercise their claws on the bark. In fall, randy bucks leave traces of antler velvet on the trunks. In winter, legions of dark-eyed juncos hunker down on the low branches just at the edge of the deep wood to wait out the snow squalls before carbo-loading anew on dried seeds. The woods teem with life. Little of it is human. The satellites that orbit far, far above the trees can spot all sorts of earth-based minutiae and exacting detail, but even their sharp eyes cannot penetrate the dense hardwoods, not even in winter, to say nothing of the full canopy months from May to early October. Google Earth is able to zero in, however, on the pasture line in the lowest section of the Desmond farm. The eye in the sky can make out the red barn at the pasture's southwestern corner and upslope the small white farmhouse. Google Earth can identify the even smaller cabin standing about 1,000 feet south of the main house and serving as Beatrice's office. And where the creek cuts through open land, it shows up on overhead photographs, as does a small pond fed by springs and mountain runoff. But more than 30 acres of Desmond woodland remain inscrutable, blending seamlessly with hundreds and hundreds of surrounding forest acres. So many of the daily struggles that play out beneath the trees, competitions for sunlight, water, food, shelter, territory, and mates, are hidden from both the golden eagle and the orbiting satellites, much as the daily struggles of Seneca County residents remain invisible to the culture that prevails in the rest of America. Not surprisingly, most of the humans occupying this remote, rugged landscape were born here, like their parents and grandparents before them. Beatrice Desmond, born and raised in Boston, is an exception.
Right. So, go ahead.
Well, if you want, I can charge ahead with the second reading, or we can chat in between, whichever.
And so, say a little bit about why you chose that particular passage to read.
To give a feel for the novel, even though the novels get progressively sunnier as we go along.
Yes,
the
they
first
do.
one is a lot darker. But there is a dark, brooding feel to the landscape. I mean, look at this. This is my middle barn. I mean, I took this picture, and there's a heavy muffin feel to it. And West Virginia is gobsmackingly beautiful at times, but there's this weight to the landscape, to the culture, and it can be appealing in an odd way. I mean, darkness can be appealing in an odd way. And as I said, I consider West Virginia a character. And I thought that passage gives an example. We're influenced by how we live, by where we live.
Absolutely.
And the landscape where Beatrice lives has a big impact on who she is and who she's becoming, for good and ill.
Because she has to manage staying warm, having food when stores are so far away, dealing with the snow, the ice.
The snow.
And the snow doesn't just fall and go away because of the terrain and the altitude and the way the land is, right?
And
Yeah.
one of the things that I spoke of darkness, it is literally dark when you live in a hollow, literally dark. In wintertime, the sun, sets in winter, but you get this crepuscular light from about 2 o'clock on. My own house is in shadow in the wintertime between, I don't know, certainly early morning and then from 2 o'clock on. And
Wow.
the number of hours where you get bright light is rare. All the rarer because when you live in a hollow with all those wonderful trees, we are actually in a non-tropical rainforest. And fog is cool. I love fog. But there are times in the middle of winter, oh God, am I ever going to see the sun again? And it is not unusual to have 2 weeks go by where you see not one bit of sunshine. And that does something to
that
you.
would be hard.
It is.
That would be really
Again,
hard.
there's a beauty to it.
Yeah.
And there's kind of a mysterious beauty to it. But there are times where, could the sun please come out? And the snow please melt?
Yeah. And so Beatrice does get out of the dark.
Well, again, not entirely by her own doing. Fate intervenes.
Right.
In the first chapter of the first book, I use the term serendipity. And serendipity is usually used in a positive sense. And Beatrice is hoping some serendipity will, smack her upside her head. And unfortunately, she gets smacked upside her head in a few lousy ways. But fate does indeed intervene by bringing these two people into her life. Clara, the 13-year-old local girl in need of temporary rescue from an abusive domestic situation. And for various reasons, the extended family is unable to take care of Clara. And they finagle this situation where they pounce on Beatrice and have her be the temporary shelter, which, for reasons that are too lengthy to get into, becomes permanent. So here now you have these two relative strangers from completely different backgrounds trying to find some way to merge their lives.
Yeah.
And for all the conflict and challenges that generates, especially where Beatrice has never been a mother before, it's for the ultimate good for both of them. And they find out that they've got a lot of things in common. Fate's other way of intervening is dumping Tanner Fordyce into her life. And it's funny, I've had a number of people say, I just love Tanner. That I think they're kind of hot for Tanner. And he is a wealthy, international businessman and philanthropist who lives part-time in my fictional Seneca County, who has written a memoir that turns out to be a pack of lies. And shortly, even by the standards of autobiographies, which are pretty low, and shortly before the scheduled publication date, the publisher realizes this and it has to be revised. And the publicist who is hyping the book happens to be an old friend of Beatrice's. And she dragoons Beatrice, knowing Beatrice has an editing background and lives close to this guy. to collaborate with him. And so the collaboration begins, again, against her will initially, and it is hate at first sight for Beatrice and Tanner. But they're professional enough to, excuse me, to forge a working relationship which morphs into friendship and ultimately into a very rocky romance. The Tanner
It's making me smile just thinking about it.
well, the Tanner character is ostensibly a guy who's got the world by the tail. I mean, he's rich, he's successful, he's Harvard educated, he's great looking, women are falling at his feet, he's well connected, and yet you got to figure out wonder why this guy lives like a hermit for a big chunk of the year on an isolated mountaintop in Seneca County. And Beatrice, because she is very sensitive about things like this, susses out that all is not what it seems to be with Tanner, which is a good thing for her because she doesn't much like this persona he projects to the world. She learns early on that he was not born with a silver spoon in his mouth, as he's given everyone to believe. In fact, came from a gritty blue-collar background, much like her own. And later on, in the course of working on this revised autobiography, she learns that he had a catastrophically abusive childhood, which makes Clara's current situation look like a walk in the park. Those scars that all three of these main characters bear, Clara, Beatrice, and Tanner, provide common ground for them. But as we all know, our emotional baggage can also have a way of lousing up future. It creates conflict too.
Yeah. Very interesting conflict.
It gets worse.
Would you like to read another passage?
Sure. This is from the first book, and I thought I'd give a little comic relief. Because this, first of all, is a scene I think we've all experienced where we're in a public place and we come across someone we cannot stand, and social decorum dictates that we make some kind of light conversation with them, and we desperately don't want to do it. The two women in this scene are both connected with Clara. One is Clara's aunt by marriage, Amanda Buckhalter, who is a woman who has done an enormous amount of work on herself, really pulling herself up by her bootstraps, has a lot of achievements to her credit, but she doesn't quite trust in them. She's perpetually insecure, and because of that insecurity, she's perpetually uptight and just a little judgmental. The other character is Amanda's former sister-in-law, Clara's mother. Clara's mother's name is Cherise Trask, and I'll let Cherise speak for herself. Amanda Buckhalter could think of better ways to spend a balmy day in mid-April than immersing herself in the claustrophobically stacked shopping lanes of the Marlboro Walmart. Amanda aimed her cart toward one of the checkout counters. She groaned inwardly, noting the outrageously black dye job on the overweight 60-something clerk. Then she caught sight 2 counters over of a familiar figure, a very trim, albeit curvy figure, which is why the woman stood out. Amanda immediately bent over one of the scandal sheets beckoning impulse buyers trapped in the checkout lane. She tried to look absorbed by the latest celebrity rehab, DUI, eating disorder saga. She was embarrassed to be seen reading one of those dreadful rags, but she desperately wanted to avoid a conversation with that piece of trailer trash, Cherise Trask. The ploy failed. Amanda nodded curtly, hoping that that acknowledgement would suffice, but Cherise kept waving, pointing to the ring in her left hand. Then Cherise yelled, cheerfully but at full volume, that Amanda was not to leave the store before they had a chance to chat. Amanda felt a red wave sweep from her face to her chest. Talking to Cherise was the last thing she wanted to do, but the skank would probably cause even more mortification if Amanda tried to slip away. Amanda took more time than usual to check the carousel to make sure she had not missed any of her bagged purchases. Despite the line of customers waiting to check out, the clerk paused to watch Amanda carefully examining the carousel. She crossed her arms over her stout chest and glared, Amanda glared right back before spinning around and muscling her shopping cart out of the checkout lane. She thought she heard a snigger exchange between the old biddy and the next customer. That snigger would obsess Amanda later in the day. But right now her energy was focused on Charisse, who by now had pranced over to her. Amanda's eyes darted down to the woman's feet. Hooker shoes. Ridiculous. But isn't that exactly what Charisse is? Hooking up with an affluent man she doesn't love, trading sexual favors for material possessions? How you doing, girl? Charisse exclaimed cheerfully. I'm doing well, Charisse, Amanda replied leadenly. I suppose you've heard the news by now, Charisse continued, flapping her left hand. Rodney and I have set a date. June 14th. He is just the most impatient boy. He could not wait to reel me in, so here I am, rushing around, making all these arrangements at the last minute. Men have no idea. Last I heard, the wedding was off, Amanda said bluntly. Charisse narrowed her eyes for an instant, then resumed her bubbly demeanor. Oh, I just bet my ex was spreading nasty rumors. He is so jealous. But I'm surprised Ben would believe anything his little brother says about me. Ben is Amanda's husband and Clara's uncle. Ben is one Buckhalter, always had his shit together. Charisse winked knowingly. Amanda winced but kept silent. There were many things about her husband that annoyed her mightily. There were many things about the whole Buckhalter clan she found trying. But Amanda never, not in her most insecure moments, doubted her husband's fidelity. Nor did she doubt for a minute Ben's ability to see right through his former sister-in-law. Now, hon, I know a lot of water grown up under our feet since Mike and me split, but you was always fair with me, and I hear you didn't go swallow all that trash Mike's doesn't spread on. That's yesterday's newspaper. I always figured you and me had a lot in common putting up with all that Buckhalter nonsense. You're kind of like the sister I never had. Charisse paused to scrutinize the other woman. She saw the constipated expression Amanda so often wore when she was in disapproving mode, which was nearly always. Damn, that girl needs to get laid more often. Big Ben looks like he should be hung like a horse, so you'd think Amanda would be wearing a smile from ear to ear. But poor old Ben probably has a tough time getting it up when he looks at that sour schoolmarm face and that skinny, flat-chested, tight-ass body. What a waste of a good man. But not knowing really how to read Amanda, Charisse just charged ahead. So we was hoping, Rodney and me, that you and Ben would come to our wedding. Amanda's eyes widened in incredulity. She sputtered, You want us at your wedding? Well, hon, I want you at our wedding. I don't have no mama around, and I figure I'm going to need a little womanly help on the big day, what with the morning sickness and all. Charisse's right hand caressed her abdomen, her lower abdomen, Amanda noted. Feeling slightly ill herself, Amanda realized pregnancy would be the perfect ruse to get Rodney to trot down the aisle. But of course, Amanda knew there was no baby. There was no pregnancy. One of Amanda's talkative former classmates worked at the Charleston hospital where Charisse had gotten a tubal ligation a decade earlier. But right now, Charisse was standing with pelvis thrust forward in an effort to simulate a baby bump. She continued to rub her lower abdomen. Amanda bit her lip. Rodney was just stupid enough to buy the act. Men are hopeless. I must say I love Charisse.
That was great.
Charisse is a horrible human being, but she was so much fun to write.
That was great, and I love how each character, how you really take their viewpoint and you really, in a nutshell, you manage to get them who they are across.
Well, I thank you, and I think that's important to see things occasionally from their point of view.
Yeah. Well, you do the whole book that way.
Yeah, especially in the first one, yeah.
Right. Even the dog, Ralph.
Oh,
Ralph has his own chapter, right?
Yes, he does.
Yes.
Yes, he does. And he figures in my third one also.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's see if did anybody want to ask a question or comment on anything? Everybody gets really shy. Okay.
Why did you choose to live in West Virginia?
Land, short answer. I had llamas, and I wanted to get more extensively into breeding them, and I just couldn't afford the acreage prices in Virginia. And we were trying to make something work in Highland County, and it just didn't work. And we finally crossed the border, and we could put together a package of affordable land and a place that we could live in, although we had to do a lot of fixing up.
Still West Virginia. I spent a lot of time hiking in there.
Did you?
Beautiful.
Where?
Beautiful.
Where in West Virginia?
Oh, Dolly Sides,
Oh, yeah,
Falls, Dane Valley,
Yeah.
all those.
Well north of me, a little bit more civilized than where I live.
How many of the characteristics of Beatrice are autobiographical?
Well, Beatrice and I share life events. Llamas, living in West Virginia, being a northern transplant, we went to the same school. But I'm not lying when I say I'm very different from Beatrice. There's a little bit of me in Beatrice, in Clara, in Tanner, and in Evie. Beatrice is part of the dynamic of writing a novel that the characters take off on their own. But there are things that Beatrice does. No way I would take it in a 13-year-old girl. Hell no.
That's what she said too, right?
You moved to West Virginia for the llamas or for the writing?
Oh, for the llamas. It's worked out well because I have a wonderful office, my own little separate office with a gorgeous sweep of view. But the original reason was totally for the llamas.
How many llamas do you have?
I don't have them any longer. At peak, I had 8, and I had llamas for almost 20 years. Part of the time in Virginia and part of the time in West Virginia.
Anyone else?
How was the transition from, or perhaps you still do ghost writing?
Oh, no, I don't.
No,
I don't. As I was mentioning to Eka, the universe kind of tapped me on the shoulder. And 1 month after I finished the first Hillwilla, I lost my job. So I decided, girl, you're going to write that novel? Time's a waste. You better do it now and commit fully.
How long did it take you to write your first novel?
Well, the first novel took me 3 years, but that was because it was a busman's holiday. I was juggling, I was writing thousands and thousands of words every month on tight deadlines, and then I would try and come after dinner, sit down with my laptop and bang out a chapter. And I mean, I did it, but it's slow when you're already writing full time. The other ones went, I think the second one took a full year, and I think the third one took only 9 months. We're getting better.
How many do you plan to write?
Well, there will be 3 Hillwillas, and the third is in the pipeline. And then I also have in the pipeline a novel about Irish immigrants to Boston in the early 20th century. And that, again, I don't know when it's going to come out. My publisher is interested in it, but who knows. And then I'm currently researching a novel about French-Canadian migrant workers in New England, also at the turn of the 20th century.
Did you live in Boston?
I'm born and raised in Boston. I thought my long A's would have given me away. I picked up a lot of Virginia and a little bit of West Virginia in the accent, but that one, when I say laugh and bath and comp, that's but I do say my R's.
And there's Irish in your background?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I know we're actually a little bit over time, so I just wanted to thank you so very much for being our guest. I really appreciate it. I know you drove like 4 hours in one way to come.
I like road trips. Yeah.
Good.
I do. I mean, there's nothing else that you need to do except keep the car between those lane markers.
It's a lot more straightforward than writing a novel, huh?
It absolutely is, yes.
Do you have a publication date for the third?
No, I don't, unfortunately. I'm kind of, I suspect it's at very earliest would be late this year, probably more like next year.
Oh, really? Oh, dear. Well, when I finished the first one, I wanted to read the second one right away, and I don't know how I can wait a
Well,
year.
the one thing you learn as a writer is that whatever you think you know about publishing deadlines, you're wrong. And sometimes it takes forever, and then suddenly it's, where's that revision? Go figure.
All right, well, thank you. And Barbara, will you? Barbara, would you like to say something about upcoming events?
Yes, I would. We have a couple of wonderful things, and I see Michelle is here. Thank you so much. She's got this wonderful event this weekend, Women's Empowerment, and there's flyers over here, and I'll have her say a few things. We also have our spotlight on women, and we are highlighting one of our very long-time community members, Scotty Thompson, who's quite a dynamo, and that's in May. So those are the things, and of course, next week we have our regular Women in Networking on the fourth Wednesday of every month, and Claire Fay is coming. So we hope you'll join us for any and all of those things. I think that's it for the moment.
That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Miss Jen Avery, for being our videographer, and Beth Waller and Team What Matters for offering us a space and wine. All right. See you next week, next month. Thank you. Next month.